Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of Switch4Good. I'm Alexandra Paul with my co-host, Dotsie Vaush, and we're very excited to speak with our guest today, Matthew Prescott. But first, I want to ask you, Dotsie, how was your weekend?
Oh, you're so lovely. Thank you for asking.
I saw those great pictures, so I wanted to share with our listeners.
Oh, gosh, it was extraordinary. I was up at Animal Place, which is a sanctuary about an hour north of Sacramento in Grass Valley. And I went up there to speak at one of their fundraisers that they had. We did a 5K run for the chickens, but Animal Place is known for their wide, broad scale, very large chicken rescues. And there's actually a documentary out called Turlock. I think it was made 4 or 5 years ago, but it was the largest hen rescue ever, where a farmer had run out of money. And so he just abandoned like 50,000 chickens to starve to death. I mean, he left them in their cages and everything. This was a windowless large shed. And so animal control didn't find them for about a week later. So many of them were very sick and starving and died, but Animal Place was able to rescue thousands and thousands of them and get them placed. So the run for the chickens was to raise money for them to be able to build a whole another stratosphere of chicken house on their property. So I don't know, it always feels so good just to come down to center and spend time with the animals. It's just my happy place. I'm going to have a sanctuary one day.
All sorts of chickens? Rhode Island Reds? What kind of chickens?
There were guinea hens, and that was my first time meeting guinea hens. They are crazy looking. They have the most gorgeous, thick, full feathers, but then these little teeny tiny, like naked heads that make them look all like they're, 400-year-old ladies. But then there were egg-laying hens, so like the white birds, there were the golden egg-laying hens. There's actually quite a variety.
There are a lot of, and our guest today will be able to talk a little bit about the life of hens. They're more than just feathers and meat. Because Matthew I've heard him speak about the secret life of hens.
So you have a sweet little doggie that you're not straining for no reason.
Michael, our board engineer, has 2 dogs, 2 rescue dogs. No, it's okay.
He's fine.
You can leave Trixie here, and they are amazing.
Did you do anything fun this weekend?
You know what? I was this pretty quiet weekend for me, actually.
But you just married your sister.
Well, I did you married her
last
week. Last week I did. So I'm going to save that for another show, though, because I want to get to Matthew.
I want to hear more. Because you were the minister, so we can talk about how that went.
It was a pretty vegan wedding, actually, because all my siblings are vegan too. So,
Yay.
Anyway.
Yay.
Yeah. So
Good.
let's.
All right. So I'll read this intro that they'll just play, Matthew, because I want to get this in, and then we'll jump right in.
All right.
Cool. Okay. With less resources and a growing human population to feed, ever wonder what it's going to take to save the world? More plants, less meat, greener planet. You can save the world with every single bite. Food is the solution. It is this concept that led our very special guest today, Matthew Prescott, to write his own book, Food is the Solution: What to Eat to Save the World. Matthew's also the Senior Director of Food and Agriculture for the Humane Society of the United States. Having switched to a plant-based diet around 20 years ago, Matthew has become a leading figure in the environmental food movement, advocating for a greener, healthier, and happier world. His work has helped lead to sweeping changes in the supply chains of hundreds of major food companies. He believes that our plates have the power to heal the world. In his book, Matthew shares the message, bringing a breadth of experience and knowledge along with over 80 mouthwatering plant-based recipes. Jerked jackfruit tacos with grilled pineapple, anyone? Sign me up. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that you're a busy guy. You do a lot of media, a lot of podcasts, so we're really grateful that you're here with us.
This is great. I'm so excited to be on. I'm so excited for what you all are doing, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Cool. I want to start out. I watched you speak in a YouTube video, and you simply give like a 2.5-minute version on how inefficient our food system is. And you talk about we grow about 20 pounds of crops, so food for the animals, so, soybeans, veg crops, that yields only 1 pound of that animal or 1 pound of meat, right? So 20 to 1. 30% of the entire world's land is used for growing meat. That seems like if that continues, I don't know when, the year 2050, 2060, when are we going to run out of land? We obviously have to start doing more with less. So just to start things off, how can I personally, me, or any one person listening and hears these stats and is like, holy crap, my kids are going to starve to death. What can I do? What can one person do? What a couple first steps they can make?
Yeah, it's when we talk about the environment and we talk about climate change and all of these big, huge problems facing the world, it's a lot of doom and gloom, to be honest.
Yeah.
The UN recently released a new report saying that climate change crises are going to start a lot sooner than previously predicted. By 2040, they say we're going to be pretty much in global turmoil as a result of climate change, which 2040 is not that far away.
22 years. That's nothing.
Yeah.
It goes on blink of an eye.
We'll all be alive and relatively well.
And don't they say that we have to grow twice as much food by 2050?
We'll have to grow twice as much food. The population continues growing. And so, there can be a lot of doom and gloom. But the good news behind all of this is that the solutions are relatively simple. They're easy things that all of us can do. You mentioned before how it takes 20 pounds of kind of plant matter, beans and grains and corn, for example, to grow just 1 pound of meat from an animal. Well, that means that just by eating plant-based foods, we can shepherd in a much more resource-efficient food supply. We can feed more people with less. And that's exactly what we need to do if we want to save the planet for future generations. We need to be able to do more with less. And that's what plant-based eating offers us.
So, okay, we know that, or you and I and Alexandra know that plants have bountiful sources of protein. That's where the animals get their protein. And then we recycle that through the animals and think that we need to eat the animal to get the protein. Can you bust that myth?
Yeah, it's crazy to think that we need to funnel protein-rich, nutrient-dense food through an animal in order to get protein it's just a myth. In fact, we eat way too much protein, especially in the developed world, and it's no good for us. It leads to chronic diseases. It leads to the worst healthcare problems and healthcare crises that we have in our country, in part, especially because the protein, when it comes from animals, is also full of fat and saturated fat and cholesterol and all these other really nasty, really negative things, not to mention environmentally unsustainable. So there's a whole world of plant-based proteins out there that are packed with protein. That green peas, for example, pea protein, peanuts, peanut butter, tofu, seitan, tempeh. You could go on and on and on. Even green leafy vegetables have protein in them. Protein is found in so many of the foods that we eat. And just by eating more of those products that come from plant sources rather than the animal sources, we can do something that's good for our health. We can do something that's good for the planet and something that's delicious in the process. Before I became vegan and before I started advocating for a plant-based diet, I just kind of ate like the typical American diet, meat and potatoes. We'd have hamburgers, we'd have steak, chicken. I pretty much stuck to that type of food. I never even thought to try foods like tofu or tempeh or to, use products like chickpeas in different kinds of applications. And once I made the switch to a vegetarian and then a vegan diet, I realized that there's a lot of creativity that can be done in the kitchen to eat better and more sustainably, yes, but also just to eat a bigger variety of delicious foods, which is kind of a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, one thing that I don't think meat eaters ever think about is that over 50% of the protein intake that they eat comes from plants. But they're not factoring that in, right? They're just counting every time they eat a chicken breast or maybe every time they eat an egg or something. But talk about over proteining. If they're trying to do the, maybe 1 gram per pound of body weight or 2, for goodness sake, some bodybuilders, they're getting an incredible amount of protein from the plant sources because plants are alive and they're made of amino acids. And so they have protein I say all the time, lemons have 16% protein. No one even recognizes that a fruit or a vegetable would have that element as part of it, but it does. So you need to be adding in all the plants into your, protein list, Michael. I don't know if you count your protein.
Wow.
And by the way, your book has incredible variety. So your book is proof that you can eat an incredible, varied diet as a vegan. I want to just delve a little deeper into what Dotsie asked, which is the waste that goes into getting meat from animals. You have a talk where you will start dissecting how much resources go into an egg sandwich. And you start by pouring a gallon of water just away. And actually, that's just the beginning. Can you delve more deeply into this conversation?
Yeah. So, I was really fortunate earlier this year to be invited to do a TED Talk at UCLA, which I think is a video you're referring to. And
I think you were at Google too. I saw you at Google.
Yeah, Google invited me to do a Google food talk in their kind of kitchen lab, I guess they call it, which was a really fun experience. But I was trying to come up with a way to visually illustrate to an audience of people. At UCLA, there were about 2,000 people in the audience and all the people who view it online. And I wanted to come up with a visual way to illustrate exactly what it looks like to waste all the resources that go into making meat, eggs, and dairy. And so I kind of centered the talk around the idea of an egg sandwich where you've got cheese and a little bit of sausage and an egg patty, for example, something you might get at McDonald's or any other kind of fast food chain for breakfast. And I dumped out a gallon of water on the stage and said, essentially, if you want to make just the egg in this breakfast sandwich, you'd have to dump out not one but 53 gallons of water. That's how many gallons of water go into producing a single egg. And the reason for that is when we eat a product from an animal, an egg or a glass of milk or a burger or a chicken nugget, we're not just eating the meat from that animal. We're essentially eating all of the resources that have been put into that animal to make that product, which also means all the resources that have been put into growing the crops to feed that animal. So when you think about water usage, for example, 53 gallons to make one egg, well, you've got to cut down large swaths of land in order to grow feed for chickens. You've got to water all those plants. You've got to harvest them. You've got to transport them. You've got to process them. Then you've got to feed them to the chickens, who also drink water, obviously, to stay alive. And so when you eat their egg at the end, you've eaten all of those resources. A glass of soy milk takes only about 20 gallons of water to produce. But a glass of cow's milk takes hundreds of gallons of water to produce. And the reason for that is when you eat plant-based foods, you're just cutting out the middleman. You're just taking the plant-based product and turning it directly into food rather than funneling it through an animal first. It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer, but pretty much nobody knows about this. But thanks to you, you're getting the word out. Michael, had you heard this before?
I have actually, yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm a little bit more, in tune with it. I mean, I grew up on a farm, where I had to deal with animals, feeding them and doing all the things that we're talking about here. Okay. So,
So
unfortunately, I was on that end.
So when you eat a burger, do you think of what is it? Is it 5,000 gallons for a quarter pounder? How many gallons of water is it for a quarter pounder?
Yeah, it's thousands. I think for a steak, for just a regular cut of steak, it's about 2,500 gallons. 2,500.
So, okay, Michael, that's the picture we want in your head next time you eat a steak.
Oh, perfect. Just keep putting these pictures in my head. I appreciate it. Thanks.
And it wasn't always this way. I mean, farms have evolved over even just the last few decades to become these industrialized mega farms where even, my parents' generation, for example, you still had to use the animal as a middleman between crops and meat or milk or eggs. But a lot fewer resources went into them in order to produce that, and it wasn't produced as industrially. And so a lot of people today, I don't think, realize exactly how much our food supply has changed and how industrialized it's become and how mega these farms have become over the last few years. And so, couple that with our population growth, where we need to be producing, exponentially more meat and dairy and eggs to feed the global population, and it's just been a recipe for disaster.
I think on top of all of it, too, is the fact that I hate the waste. I hate that we produce so much of this food and we just simply throw it away more than we consume it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was in the course of writing my book, I did a little bit of research into these dairy farms in upstate New York, which is a big dairy producing part of the country. And on one of these farms that I was looking into, there are about 8,000 cows. Those 8,000 cows produce about 314 million pounds of waste every single year of manure. That's like 78,000 Ford F-150 trucks in weight, just from this one dairy farm in one part of one state. It's really an astonishing amount of waste that comes out of these places.
When I know when Al Gore was asked why he didn't include animal agriculture into the Inconvenient Truth, the first version of Inconvenient Truth, he said, quite frankly, because it's too inconvenient of a truth for people. But we know that the United Nations says that the livestock sector is number 2 or 3 on the list of serious environmental problems and infractions. And they even say at every scale, from local to global. And that is something that was astounding to me, because local often comes across to many people as good, right? Buying fresh, buying local, staying within your region so that it's not traveling, and apple's not coming from New Zealand to California. Obviously, that's not efficient. But most people also think that local means humane and kind and well thought out and very efficient. And I know when I was at Animal Place this weekend, they have a lot of people that come through there and do the tour. And obviously Animal Place, before you get to see the animals, you kind of go through their small museum that talks about wide animal agriculture on a big scale. And a lot of the people that fill out their forms at the end say, well, you focus on big ag, but we buy local. So what do we say to those people? How do we help them understand local animal farming is a major infractor as well?
Yeah, through my work at the Humane Society, we've encountered farmers markets that sell locally produced eggs, for example, that still come from chickens confined in cages so tightly the animals can't even spread their wings. These are local eggs. They're coming from only a few miles away. They're being sold at a farmer's market of all places, but they still come from the very same cage confinement systems that are typical on factory farms. It is still factory farm product. Environmentally, researchers at Carnegie Mellon University did a study to compare the environmental impacts of eating a local diet versus eating a plant-based diet. And what they found was that by eating plant-based just one day a week, you can have a greater impact on climate change than by eating 100% of your food from local sources 7 days a week, which would be really impossible to do anyway, unless that includes spices and herbs and everything you eat, you could eat local 7 days a week, and you're still not going to do as much good for the planet as if you ate a plant-based diet 1 day a week.
Yeah.
So, if you wanted to do, if you want to go above and beyond, some people are doing a plant-based diet and trying to get a lot of their ingredients locally. That's certainly a good thing. But definitely the more important factor is eating plant-based over eating local.
I mean, you have to just try to do better and better and better. I feel like I call local eating animals locally is like half-assing it. When I was training, some days I half-assed it, not very often, but some days I just, I didn't bring my best. I didn't bring everything I had. So if we really care, we're really going to make a difference. No more half-assing.
Yeah. And who would really laugh at the idea of local food equating to necessarily something better is all of the countless people across the country in rural areas who are living in the shadow of factory farms. I visited a woman on the eastern shore of Maryland in the course of writing my book named Lisa. She lives on land that's been part of her family for like 4 generations, really bucolic kind of setting. But they've been invaded by these chicken factory farms. And now just throughout her totally otherwise normal suburban neighborhood, they've got these mega farms, right, literally in her backyard. The flies are so thick they can't even go outside. The stench is terrible. When I was there, I saw just buzzards, dozens of buzzards flying overhead ready to pick off these dead birds. Well, for Lisa and her neighbors, those factory farms are local. They couldn't get more local than that. They're literally in their backyard. They're like a stone's throw away from the house, but they're not good. They're still factory farms. You can't get much more local, and they're still terrible, terrible places. So, anybody I think who's focusing on eating local, generally I would say that's a good thing. But if you're eating meat and dairy and eggs, it's still probably contributing to the problem of factory farming.
And most of the, in the United States, you talk about how chickens are most of the meat that is eaten in the United States. And Americans seem to think chicken is the better choice, both health-wise and environmentally. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. 9 out of every 10 animals we eat in the U.S. is a chicken. There are about 10 billion farm animals in the country, and of those 10 billion, about 9 billion are chickens. We are just knee deep in chickens. The amount of waste that they produce is staggering. The amount of land that requires is staggering. The amount of resources that go to feeding all those chickens is staggering. The whole thing is completely unsustainable. And from a health perspective, chicken has always been marketed as a kind of lean meat, but that's changed a lot in recent years. Chicken factory farmers in the chicken industry have been pushing what we would call kind of the bird's genetic limit to the max. So chickens now are bred to grow really large, really fast. And they grow at such a huge rate that if a human baby grew the same way, she would weigh over 600 pounds when she was just 2 months old. So imagine a 2-month-old baby weighing 600 pounds. That's what chickens are in this country now. And what that has resulted in, among all the animal welfare problems you can imagine that come with that, is are problems in the animal's fat and musculature. And those problems have resulted in chickens on the whole now having about 9% less protein and 200% more fat than they did even 5 years ago. So even just in the last 5 years, chicken, which was once a lean meat, has a lot less protein and a lot more fat in it.
They're 5 times at slaughter weight the size that they were in 1957.
Exactly. That's right. They're 5 times what they were in 1957. These are not your grandmother's chickens anymore. These are Frankenbirds that have been just bred to grow monstrously huge. And the result is their legs break out from underneath them because they're so top heavy. They have heart attacks. Their lungs fail. And there's no other example in the animal kingdom where a baby animal has a heart attack. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And
so
that's common in chicken production.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you when you said baby. It's the other thing that I think that no one recognizes or has any idea that's going on is every single farm animal, large scale production farm animal anyway that we're eating is a baby. A lot of people don't want to touch veal because it's a baby, but they slaughter these chickens at only months of age. They slaughter pigs at 6 months of age. They're babies. I've seen them come into Farmer John's downtown, babies. They're tiny. And same with cattle. They're usually under a year. So we're all eating babies.
Yeah, and I grew up eating everything under the sun. I grew up in a rural area in New Hampshire, and our neighbors had horses. There were farms nearby. We ate everything. We ate a lot of seafood, beef, chicken, you name it. But the one thing that my family wouldn't touch was veal. And I remember asking my mother at an early age, like, "Oh, why don't we eat veal?" And she said, "Oh, it's really cruel what they do to the animals, and they're just baby animals." And so that has kind of etched itself into people's consciousness. Even people who aren't vegetarian or aren't vegan by any means kind of know now veal's off limits. Well, you're right. The same principle applies to chickens. Every single chicken slaughtered in this country is a baby animal. They're not even 2 months old at the time they are killed for the market.
My mom too we didn't eat veal and we didn't eat foie gras. Not that foie gras was around a lot, but I know that my mother just said no. She taught us about foie gras really early. Michael, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, when I was on my farm, chickens were cheap, and you got a lot of them all at once. To get a steer, we only had one steer, and we raised it for a season, and we slaughtered it. We didn't have many steers. But when you buy chickens, it's amazing. They come, I remember it like it was yesterday. They come in a box, and there's 1,000 of these little baby chickens inside this box, and you have to put lights on them to raise them, to weed out where the roosters are, because you don't know, because it's just this sort of box of chickens. And I can just sense as a child just the inexpensiveness as far as building this farm to have chickens, and they duplicate. If you let the eggs sit under the hens, they're going to continue to make more babies. They just kind of they're almost like gremlins. You dump a little bit of water on them and they seem to multiply. And I think that's the saddest part about it is I think that they're just a inexpensive resource, from a protein standpoint, that farms typically abuse. And if we could put a cap on what you can actually have, like if we could just say you can't have millions of chickens, you know what I mean, as a farm, that'd be better off.
Yeah, I visited a chicken farmer in Arkansas recently. Big industrial factory farmer, chicken farm type of guy. He's a good guy. He just, has kind of entered that line of work, because it's one of the few options in rural Arkansas if you want to make some money. And I was talking to him about kind of better ways they could treat the animals, different types of production systems they could use to treat the animals better. And I said, look, the way you're doing it now, you've got, thousands and thousands and thousands of your chickens die. They don't even make it to market. That can't be efficient for you as a farmer. You're wasting all that money. And he said, you know what, chickens are cheap. And it doesn't really matter if that many of them die because the conditions are so terrible because they're so cheap to buy, which is really sad. And you think about, all of the problems of industrial factory farming in terms of animal cruelty. And then you've got, thousands and millions of animals who die before they even ever end up at the slaughterhouse, just totally in vain. It's a really terrible system. But the reason why that system exists is because people continue eating the product, and a lot of it. The reason why that farmer down in Arkansas, who I hung out with, needs to pump out that many chickens is because people are demanding it. And that is slowly changing, fortunately, as plant-based eating becomes more and more and more popular. And I think one of the great effects that we're going to see from a switch to a plant-based diet is that there's going to be less strain on the farming system to pump out so many animals, and farmers will eventually be able to use these better methods of animal production for the animals that continue to be raised.
Yeah, it's already built in. They know that there's a percentage of loss, and they just live with that percentage of loss.
One of the things with chickens that I learned just last week was how dirty they are. Everyone thinks chickens are healthier, but Matthew, tell me if I'm wrong, but apparently if the reason they put them in a bag when when you buy it at the grocery store is because there's such a chance of salmonella around the chicken that's in the store in all wrapped up because they're so dirty. The production lines are so fast.
Yeah, chickens are not dirty as natural animals.
No, I'm sorry. The meat is, and the whole processing is so fast and so done. Is that it was recommended in this article that I read that if you use a cart in a supermarket, you should wash your hands afterwards, because if somebody before you has picked up chicken and then put their hands on the cart handle, you are going to pass it. I was stunned. I thought, oh my God, it's everywhere. Even if you're a vegan and you don't have that stuff in your house.
Yeah, and chickens in nature, like Dotsie, you said, they're clean animals. Yeah. They're very fastidious. Yeah. They keep themselves clean. Part of their way of keeping themselves clean is they like to dust bathe, where they kind of flap around in the dirt. And I know that sounds like they're getting dirty, but to them that's clean because they're getting rid of mites and debris and all kinds of other things on them. But their meat is absolutely toxic from a health standpoint, not just physiologically, but from the contaminants that are on it. And part of the reason for that is chicken slaughterhouses use this like totally archaic method of slaughter where I'll spare the details, all the gruesome details, but basically the last stage of it ends up with the chicken in a tank of scalding hot water that's meant to remove their feathers. But the system is really messed up, and a lot of chickens end up in that tank of scalding hot water while they're still alive. And the first thing they do when that happens is they release all their waste into that water. Then you've got all the chickens behind them, all the chickens who come after them going through that same tank of hot water that's filled with feces, it's filled with waste. And so they end up at the grocery store, they have to pump them full of chlorine. They have to do all kinds of other nasty things to try to kill it. And it doesn't even work. So you have to treat it like a biohazard in your kitchen.
Yeah, the like 25% of our world's tetracyclines and penicillins are fed to chickens. I mean, that is an extraordinary amount of medicines and antibiotics that we're eating, and they have to feed them to them so they don't make people sick. And they still make people sick every once in a while. I mean, I don't know. It seems like a salmonella outbreak happens. I don't know.
All the time, and
it's on the news. Yeah, it feels like it's every other month or something.
And that, of course, is not helping at all the resistance that's happening to antibiotics. So it's really hurting humans that we're eating chickens. So I wanted to move on. Chickens deserve their entire show themselves because they're totally underappreciated as beings.
But
that's
a good point.
Dotsie mentioned the fact that Al Gore said that it was too inconvenient for people to change their diet. But one of your main points is it actually isn't that inconvenient. So tell us a little bit about what your experience has been in that, and what you tell folks when they're talking.
I should note also that I think Al Gore has since changed his tune because he is now vegan, and he's been vegan for a few years. So I think he's probably found it a little more convenient than maybe he initially thought.
I think he started looking really good after he lost a lot of weight and started looking really good when he went vegan.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, he lost a lot of weight, and he looks a lot healthier.
And that'll show up in the next documentary because I think he's working on another one. So
excellent. Yeah,
we'll hopefully have that inconvenient truth of animal agriculture in with the environment documentary. That's really important.
Yeah, my own experience with it, you're absolutely right, is that it is not only not inconvenient, but it is totally, you can totally expand your culinary repertoire, so to speak. A lot of people think that by becoming vegan or becoming vegetarian, you're limiting certain things. And obviously you are limiting a few things that you don't want to eat anymore, but it opens up this whole world of other food stuff, of other ingredients that you probably never would have thought to eat before, and other ways of preparing food that you never would have thought of before. So my own background is my sister became vegetarian when I was really young. I was probably like 12 years old or something. And I'd never even heard the word vegetarian before, let alone met one. And I had no idea what to do with it. I was like, I would make fun of her. I'd put my steak on the end of my fork and stick it in her face and make a mooing
One
sound.
of those, huh?
Yeah, I was one of those. By one of those, I mean a good little brother. That's like what And I thought it seemed like Al Gore. I thought it was like really inconvenient. I was like, oh, now my mom's got to make a veggie burger alongside a hamburger. But I started to kind of try some of these foods. I loved food. I loved eating. I didn't care if it was a hamburger or a veggie burger. If it was good, it was good. I wanted to eat it. So I started eating some of the foods that she was having, and I loved them. I was totally surprised to find out that I loved tofu, that I loved tempeh, that I loved veggie burgers, and all kinds of other products that I just never even knew existed or would have thought to try before. I tried ethnic food for the first time. I tried Indian food and Thai food and Vietnamese food, Ethiopian food. Things now that I crave and that I love and that are my favorite types of foods that before I adopted a plant-based diet, I just didn't really have any interest in. And so, what I think is inconvenient is limiting yourself to just eating the same old bland things every day. And what plant-based eating did for me, and what I think it's done for a lot of people, is just kind of open their horizons up and show them there's a whole delicious world of food out there.
And what about, I know you do eat, we have people on this show who only eat a whole foods plant-based diet, and you are basically whole food, but you also eat the fake meats, you enjoy them, but you've taught, tell us about those, and then the one step farther that we're moving into, which is clean meat.
Yeah, so I eat plant-based meats. I drink plant-based milk, almond milk, oat milk. I've been drinking a lot of recently. I eat products from companies like Beyond Meat and Just Foods and Impossible Foods. The Impossible Burger, I think, is amazing. The Beyond Meat burger, when I took a bite of it, it just immediately brought me back to being at a barbecue as a kid. That taste of beef that I hadn't had in my mouth in like 20 years, just a rush of memories. And I love this stuff. I do try to balance it out by eating mostly whole plant-based foods, legumes and produce and grains and starches and other products like that. But I do like me a veggie chicken nugget once in a while. I'm not going to lie. Clean meat. Yeah. Clean meat is another thing. For people who aren't familiar with it, clean meat is actual meat. It's biological. meat, flesh and tissue, and it's made rather than from animals, basically from you could take a biopsy from a chicken one time, take a biopsy the size of a poppy seed or a sesame seed, and from that one biopsy you could grow enough chicken nuggets to feed an army or village in perpetuity. And it's identical to meat. Biologically, it is meat, but it just doesn't come from animal farming. And so I've tried it before. It's not on the market yet, but I've had the opportunity to try little samples of the product before, and it is exactly what meat. I remember meat tasting like, because it is exactly meat. I'll be the first one at the grocery store lined up to get it when it's commercially available, I think.
It's funny. I probably won't. I'm not sure how I feel about the ethics of it. So, because it still perpetuates the exploitation of animals in a way, because it keeps us on the teat, so to speak. Oh, but maybe fake meats do that too.
Well, yeah, I think it's a matter of flavor. I think if a lot of plant-based meats that are out there, I think are so good and are so close to real meat that I don't really see a need to eat clean meat when I could get the same kind of taste and sensation from eating really good veggie burger, really good veggie chicken. But I think there are a lot of people in the world who kind of have this little mental hang up about needing actual meat. And I think for that part of the population, clean meat's probably going to be really important.
I mean, there's a lot of those people, right? Not just a couple or a few. I mean, obviously it doesn't solve our health crisis whatsoever of type 2 diabetes and heart disease and hypertension and high blood pressure. So I know that I won't be partaking because of that. Plus, I just think it will
I
feel
even had a problem with the
disgusting,
Impossible Burger because it tasted too much like meat, which is a compliment to it because that's what it tries to do and will help a lot of people. Michael, have you tried the Impossible Burger?
No, not yet.
Okay, well,
so we're bringing next week. Michael's present next week.
You gotta try it. It's incredible. I have a lot of friends who are like what they would call diehard meat eaters, and they love the Impossible Burger and they love the Beyond Burger. Obviously not because it's vegetarian, but just because it's a damn good burger.
Mm-hmm. And what about for people who are wanting to go vegan? What do you recommend their first steps be?
I would recommend the first step is just realizing that it's about progress and not perfection. And I remember when I first became vegan in the late 90s, I went to a grocery store and I got this cheese. I thought it was vegan. I came back and it had some kind of like dairy ingredient in it. It was wasn't real cheese, but it wasn't totally vegan. And I was really upset, and I was really upset with myself for not having checked thoroughly. And now I think, you know what? It's just a learning experience. It's no big deal. If you're trying to make the switch, I'd say start slowly. Start with a couple days a week. Try to eat vegan just a couple days a week, or even a couple meals a week. See what foods you like. See what you don't like. Check out different products at the grocery store. If you buy one that's accidentally not vegan, don't be too hard on yourself. Eat it, and then just don't buy it again. That's my main advice. I think it's progress, not perfection.
Yeah, you applaud people for any effort that they make to lower their meat and dairy consumption because it helps the planet, and of course, it helps the animals too.
Yeah, and in fact, today, the vast majority of vegetarian food that's eaten is not eaten by vegetarians. The vast majority of soy milk that's drank in our country is not being bought by vegans. It's being bought by omnivores who are just making an effort to eat more plant-based foods. And so for me, if we want to solve our global environmental crises, if we want to help animals, if we want to reduce the number of animals on factory farms, the way that we do that is by eating more plant-based foods. And whether somebody does that 7 days a week or 1 day a week or 5 days a week, whatever it is, I think it's all good. I think it's all important. And there's no necessarily right or wrong way. I eat a fully vegan diet because I want to do the best I can. But, I was talking to somebody recently and they said, I could totally go vegan except for ice cream. I love ice cream. And first I was like, well, dude, there's Ben & Jerry's vegan ice cream.
I ate a pint of that a couple of days ago. I hadn't eaten a pint of ice cream in 10 years. But
Good for
I
you.
I don't know. I felt bad the next
Do you remember which one
morning.
it was?
Yes, and it wasn't even as good. I'll tell you what the one I like the best is the peanut butter, and it's got Oreo cookies in it.
Oh yeah, that's
And it's Ben and
amazing.
Jerry's.
Yeah, it's Ben and Jerry's,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
hadn't. So
And that's
last week,
almond based or coconut based? I think
I
they do
think
both,
it's-
right?
I don't remember. I think it's
I think
was
it's almond,
almond
yeah,
based.
almond.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and there's amazing coconut milk ice cream, and Haagen-Dazs now
yeah.
has these vegan ice cream
Oh, really?
chocolate-covered bars.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's amazing. But so my first response was like, you got to check out vegan ice cream because it's all the rage and it's everywhere. But
Right.
if for some reason, like ice cream is the one thing that's a hang up for you, just go vegan except for ice cream.
I know. Amen.
Totally. That's what I tell people.
People are like, I can't
Yeah.
but this, and you're like, oh, just keep eating that then.
Yeah.
You know, just,
but all everything else.
I would totally go vegan except for steak. All right, then go vegan except for steak.
I know. We're gonna
That's
do so
great.
much better if 10 people go vegan except for steak, then one person goes 100%.
Yeah. And I think probably what most people find if they were to put themselves in those shoes is you probably don't end up wanting the steak after you've gone otherwise vegan, or you find that there's just so many other delicious protein packed foods out there, you don't need it and you stop craving it. But yeah, it shouldn't be a hang up for anybody. If there's something that you really feel in your mind you have to have and it's an impediment to doing anything, just keep eating that one thing.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, it's not all or nothing.
No.
All of society seems to be like all or nothing in anything, and it's like that's not how it works, right?
Yeah, that's not how people work for the most part. I
Yeah,
mean, there are
psychology.
certainly some people who will like flip a switch and go vegan overnight and stay that way for the rest of their life. I didn't do it. I know some people who have. More power to them. I don't think most people are like that.
Well, I'm super impressed with you living in Texas and having this vegan, sort of lifestyle, because boy, if that isn't what they're not selling out there in Texas.
Tell us how it is in Austin.
I mean, the plates that I've seen are just full of meat, like 3-4 different types of meat on a plate. It's like, it's all meat.
Yeah, Texas is it's the cattle country for sure. Austin is a little bit different. Austin is like a vegan bubble in the heart of cattle country. But here in Austin, I mean, we can eat vegan really, really well. There's vegan taco trucks and multiple vegan ice cream shops and a vegan barbecue restaurant and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. But what I travel a lot for work, and what I find is no matter where I go, whether I'm in like a liberal vegan mecca like Austin, or I'm in Iowa or Kansas or South Carolina, there is amazing vegan food everywhere now. You can go to a TGI Fridays and get a Beyond Meat veggie burger. You can go to White Castle and for $1.99 get an Impossible Burger. You can go to Tropical Smoothie Cafe in Arkansas, which I did recently, and got veggie chicken strips. And so, I mean, this stuff is everywhere, and it's never been easier than it is now to enjoy these foods.
And speaking of amazing food, your book has a lot of terrific recipes in it. Can you tell us what your favorite one is?
Oh man, my favorite one. There's 80 recipes in there. A lot of them are foods that I've been making for years and kind of staples in my house that I love. If I had, you mentioned the jackfruit tacos at the beginning, and if I had to pick one, that's definitely up there. For people who haven't tried jackfruit before, it is incredible. When you cook it, it kind of pulls apart into a stringy type of substance like pulled pork. It looks just like pulled pork. And I can say that with authority because I live in Texas. And you add like barbecue sauce to it or jerk seasonings, which are Caribbean spices. And it just takes on this incredible meaty texture. Another recipe that I really love.
And you can get it like every grocery store. So people don't think it's some sort of like odd thing that you know how to get. It's like at every grocery store. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fruit.
Yeah.
It's real fruit. You can get it. A lot of Asian markets have it whole, like a big jackfruit, or you can buy it in a can.
Huge.
Pretty much every grocery store. I also really like, kind of similar to that in terms of preparation, there's a recipe in the book for vegan crab cakes that are made with hearts of palm. And hearts of palm, just like jackfruit kind of becomes stringy like pulled pork, hearts of palm kind of becomes stringy but a little bit softer like crab meat. And so when you mix it with the right seasonings and corn and you bread it and you fry it, it is very much like a crab cake. And I lived for many years in Maryland, which is like crab cake central. And I think that it would fool any Marylander, anyone from Baltimore. who loves crab cakes, I think try one of these and you will not know the difference.
Oh, wow. I got to try that one. Yum.
And those types of foods to me are great examples of how you can eat a plant-based diet focusing on whole foods, but still get the taste and texture of meat. You don't need to, and I do eat these products, but you don't need to buy a lot of the fake meat products because there are products in the plant kingdom like jackfruit and hearts of palm that can cook up very similar to how different types of meat products cook up. It's just a matter of trying to figure out, which ones do which things.
Great.
Yeah, go get the book. Food is the solution, people. It's so good.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Yeah. So should we ask our question of Matthew?
Yeah, you go. I always ask.
Okay, so Matthew, just whatever comes to mind, what does the phrase "switch for good" mean to you?
Oh, that's a great question. I've already thought about this, so I have the answer because I thought it's such a great name that you've hit upon. Every time I see it, and some emails from you have popped up in my inbox, and every time I see one and I see the URL, I think, God, what a good name they picked. And
yay, Dotsie! It's her foundation. Yay. Our podcast is named after her foundation. So the foundation.
Yeah, it's so great. It's I think Switch for Good is perfect because it brings up two things to mind for me, which is switching permanently, obviously, switching for good, for forever, and switching for good to be better because the foods are good, because it's a better way of living. I just think it's such a brilliant name for the foundation, for the podcast. I applaud you for coming up with it, and I think it's just so positive.
I'm glad that you like it.
Thank you.
And people don't know this, the number 4, so it's 4 things, is health, performance, sustainability, and ethics, which we never really talk about, but that's what the 4 is in there.
Wow. It's got so many double
those
meanings.
Things for good. So I love that. Thanks for, yeah, boom.
Thank you, Matthew, so much for being on our podcast. And thank you for all the great work that you're doing, spreading a very important message about veganism and saving the planet, or saving humanity, actually, and animals.
Yeah. Well,
thanks so much for having me on. It was a blast.
Good. All right. You'll come back and visit, right?
Absolutely. Okay. Anytime.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switch4good.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.